My name is John Drexler. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a second, but the thing that I like to talk about is I spent a lot of time as a product manager before becoming a developer, so kind of a reverse order of what is normal. And I think there's some really powerful, good heuristics that come from product management that make engineers just way better at their jobs. There's some like pretty low-hanging stuff that are just like other tools to put in your toolkit from the product management world that make you a lot more powerful. So this is all about problems, and I have kind of this cheeky name of like, don't solve non-problems. And this is going to kind of, I've written a lot about this. I've written a lot of blogs about this. You can check out our website. I'm like kind of obsessed with this thing. I tweet about it a lot. I yell about how agile is over-engineered and too big a lot. But this kind of boils down all of those thoughts into one simple heuristic, which is all about problem statements. So real quick, I won't belabor this for a long time. Who am I? I just mentioned product manager. I would describe myself as an okay Laravel developer. This is not a super technical talk, but you're going to learn a lot of really smart things. Chris corrects me a lot, telling me to stop being so self-deprecating about that. But the reality is I'm not Chris Morell. I am significantly more junior than that. But I run an agency called Thunk with this guy, Daniel Colborn. Daniel is in the Laravel world, does a lot of cool things. He made Ziggy and some other stuff and is just around. He worked at Titan for a long time. Now we run this agency together. It's a very small agency. I'll stop shilling after this, but you should hire us. Our whole thing is that, and again, just back to like my whole theme is we think the full stack developer, the truly full stack developer, is someone who can do some product management for themselves. And so the idea that we have is like, really, we don't have any pure PMs. I'm basically like a senior PM and a junior developer, but all the developers at Thunk need to be able to PM for themselves. And that's kind of one of the things that we hold pretty strongly. This is a guy named Mark Andreessen, who is very famous. He had this kind of like typical path of like, he's this young, amazing developer. He was successful enough that he became like the product guy and had to like run Netscape. And then eventually like that turned him into this like terrifying kingpin venture capitalist. My path into all of this is like what I call like the reverse Mark Andreessen with less money and less fame. So you can see my path through various phases of like douchebag haircuts. So I started in venture capital and did that for like 4.5 years and hung out a lot with founders. Spent a lot of time like talking about strategy and products and looking at markets, and it was really fun. It was really interesting, and what it made me realize is I just actually wanted to get closer to actually making things, because when you're doing VC, you're kind of like talking about people who are making things, and I was like, this is not very fun. So I eventually became a product manager. I was like the guy who was sleeping under the desk in a sleeping bag in Silicon Valley, and at a startup that failed, and then eventually worked at a startup where things went a lot better, and we grew a lot, and I built a product that was like profitable and did very well, and it was like super exciting, and I worked with people who were way smarter than me, and that was really cool. Through that time, what I realized even more was like, oh, I'm going to be like a really good product manager if I'm actually a programmer, and that is going to make me much better at my job. And I ended up here with Daniel, pair programming, and sort of starting over in my 30s again to learn to write code and become a Laravel developer in addition to being product manager. So like Tim Rogers, anyone here watch Tim Rogers video game reviews? He always goes, I'd like to start with the bottom line. The bottom line is that approaching problems like a product manager will make you a better developer. And that's kind of the theme here. And we'll get into what that means. I'm not going to do a big, long talk about what it means to be a product manager. That could be a big, long, boring talk. Not that interesting. What I will say just as like a couple of caveats about what this actually means.
Don't move those chairs.
There we go. Perfect. Sorry. I got it. No, we're good. It's going to collapse on me. So thinking like a product manager, a lot of this stuff, you've seen people use this term like advanced common sense. It's not terribly technical. It's not really very sophisticated even a lot of the time. It's about doing things that matter and not doing things that don't matter. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. It's like if somebody were to tell you that the key to living a happy life is like diet, exercise, sleep, and having healthy relationships. Like, yeah, it's not that complicated, but it's also very difficult to pull off. So I think that's what a lot of product management stuff is. A lot of it revolves around creating clarity, and that's what a lot of this talk is going to be about. Is that building software, as all of you know, is incredibly ambiguous. There's 1,001 ways to do things, and it is not always clear what's the next best thing to do, or how to do it, or why you should do it, and that there's a huge amount of space for failure in that ambiguity. So clarity is incredibly helpful for developers, and a product manager's job is to create that clarity. And again, the goal is just to work on stuff that matters, and the sort of like addendum to that is don't work on stuff that doesn't matter. It's not super complicated, but it's also really hard to pull off. I'm sure all of you know. It's like you can waste a tremendous amount of time on bullshit, and it's a real problem. And so part of the way that I think about this stuff is like, if you have a great product manager, they can really help with this stuff. If you've worked with a good product manager before, it's wonderful. You get a lot of value out of it. But I think a lot of engineers can actually do this for themselves. You can do this by being rigorous and discerning about what problems you solve. So I'm going to frame kind of this entire talk in terms of solving problems. What problems do I solve? What problems do I not solve? You need to rigorous in terms of like clarifying what exactly problems are, then also discerning about which ones you choose to take on. So a lot of this basically happens through asking really good questions. And there's one really powerful question at the center of all of this stuff that I think you should basically be asking all the time about virtually everything you do, which is, what problem am I solving? What problem am I solving in this meeting? What problem am I solving by writing this ticket? What problem am I solving by taking on this massive, project? What problem am I solving? You can ask it all day, every day. It's an incredibly clarifying question. So as a software developer, you're a professional problem solver. This is what you do. You come in and you solve problems. So at a kind of a high level, products solve problems. Your product would not exist unless it solved a problem for users. No one will pay for it unless it solves a problem for users. That seems pretty self-explanatory. Each individual ticket solves a problem. You wouldn't be working on a given ticket unless it solved a problem somewhere in your product. And then at a more kind of procedural level, every process or meeting or product ritual that you do should be solving a problem. We do this meeting because it meets this need that we have. I put should in parentheses there because very often this is not actually true, and that's a big thing to work on, and that's a good way to waste a lot of your time and kill morale, is have a bunch of processes where it's not clear what problem you're solving. So the really tricky thing, I think, for developers in particular, because you are really good at solving problems, is that there's a temptation to take on a lot of problems that you really shouldn't be solving. So developers are good at solving problems, right? This is like what you do. You're a professional problem solver. You're good at this. You're smart. If you don't know how to solve the problem, you know where to look or who to ask to help you solve it. The problem is then you've kind of opened yourself up to just like take on all problems. And that's an incredibly precarious position to be in. And it's a good way, again, to waste a huge amount of time. So this is where you get into this like being discerning and rigorous about which problems, like specifically which problems do I want to take on. Okay, this has all been very abstract and theoretical. We're gonna get some like extremely real examples, so real that, names have been changed to protect the witnesses, but these are all basically transcribed from real life. Sorry if anyone, I didn't know this was going to be recorded at first, so sorry. Okay. This is Chet. Chet's a customer success representative. He's all smiles. He's a real smiley guy. I don't know if you can read this, but I'll perform it theatrically for you. Chet comes in to say, hey, could you build us a new feature so that the organization admin users at our product can just impersonate everyone on their team? Chris is laughing because he knows where this one came from.
I know Chet.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
not Chet.
Look, Chet in real life is a wonderful person. So, okay, this kind of thing comes up all the time, though, right? So, okay, they're like, we have this impersonation feature, this masquerade feature, right? They say, we would love for people who are not just like admins at our company to be able to do this. We want some of our users to be able to impersonate each other, right? Okay, so there's this temptation, right, where you start going, I could think about how that would work. Like, I would need to change some like permissions policies. I would need to get into some like routing stuff. Like, we might need to like really reconsider where our routes are. We're going to need to add a bunch of tests. Like, we could build that. Yes, that's like a theoretically interesting problem. There's this temptation to jump straight into like, how would a solution work for that, right? It's an interesting problem. Maybe you do need to build this feature. but we're going to bring in a smart developer. This is Cameron from Halt and Catch Fire. She's very smart. Cameron doesn't do any of that stuff. Cameron says, what problem would that solve for them? If we were to build that, just hold on, let's pause real quick. What problem are we solving here? And Chet says, well, they just need to be able to see all the data that their employees can see. Okay, getting closer, it's a little vague. Cameron says, could you be a little more specific? And Chet says, employees book appointments in our application, and their bosses need to see the details of those appointments. Okay, that's pretty reasonable. It makes complete sense, right? So we've got a problem statement we can actually work with, which is org admins need to have access to these appointment data, but they don't currently see it. It's a real problem, right? We can work with this. This is a real problem, and it's worth solving, right? Chet's original feature request was this huge, potentially like very problematic sort of permissions policy, authentication, routing, like craziness that would have been completely unnecessary to build. By reframing this into a problem statement, which is like something really specific, like this specific user has this specific problem, we've reframed it into like, oh, we need to show appointment data on this view that we didn't used to show it on. Okay, that's like a 2-point ticket, right? That's a really common one. This is Nelson. You may recognize him from television. I just almost called him television. Nelson is a dev who doesn't solve a lot of problems. He's kind of just around. Nelson comes to you and says, I really just want to rewrite this whole feature. I have this new abstraction that's just like, it's super cool. You're going to love it, right? Just want to like rewrite this whole thing. I had a vision. I know how to make this feature great. Okay, so once again, there's a temptation to go like, well, what is it? You know, like talk to me about like all the details. I'll like debate you on the merits of your ideas. Like you have this totally new abstraction, this new way of thinking about this thing. Cameron's smart. Cameron says, hold on, wait. What problem does this refactor solve? Nelson says, well, you know, just like if we had like customers who were just like completely different from all the customers we currently have, this could just be like really helpful, really like future-proof us, and it's just like cleaner or whatever, you know. Okay, that's pretty murky. Like what specifically about this about this feature is causing problems for you right now? Like break it down into problem statements for me, right? And Nelson says, okay, honestly, this code is really hard to read and I don't understand it. So I want to turn this feature into something that I understand, right? Well, okay, that's completely valid. That's a real problem. Like, so we have this clear problem statement now, which is we have a feature that our own devs don't understand. That's a problem. That's a problem worth solving, right? So the problem with the way that it was actually presented, though, is that like Nelson's solution was misguided, and we could have spent weeks going back and forth on the merits of Nelson's idea, right? Where the underlying issue was just he was looking at code and he was afraid to touch it because he didn't understand it. Maybe it was written badly. Maybe his idea is better. But now we have grounds to kind of go look at that problem with clear eyes, basically. My other problem with this is that Nelson also positioned this as a hypothetical problem. He said, what if all of our customers were totally different from the customers we currently have, which comes up a shocking amount. Hypothetical problems are not real problems for real users. You should not solve hypothetical problems. It's a huge waste of time. So frequently, people bring up hypothetical problems, and frequently it's really smart people. And they sound smart, and they seems like maybe we should work on them because someone really smart said it, but it's fake, it's not real. So don't solve hypothetical problems. You have a lot of real problems to solve. Leave these for when they eventually come up. Okay, let's keep moving. Brent, here's Brent. He's really ambitious, he's a sales guy. He's out there wheeling and dealing, he's selling features you don't have. This guy's just like out on the frontier. He comes to you and says, hey, I could really step on the gas if we just made a mass email feature. Okay, pretty vague, maybe. What do you mean by this? What problem would this feature solve? That's probably the best way in for us to understand what this new feature is. He says, it's really just going to like supercharge our outreach workflow. Really we just want to be able to send like millions of cold emails to people who didn't opt in. Doesn't that sound really cool? Is that legal, or is that? I'm not sure if we can. He says, look, the problem is people just don't answer their emails these days, and we could get around that if we could just get around these pesky GDPR rules, right? Okay, great. So we have a couple problems here. The first problem, which is not really a problem, is GDPR laws stop our users from spamming emails, right? So it is someone's job to change laws. It's not your job, and really, especially the good ones that protect people's inboxes, it's really not your job to change those laws, right? So clearly, this just falls way outside the scope of your job. So he's presented this problem. He's come to you like, hey, I've got a feature. It's like, well, we don't want feature requests. We actually want problem statements. We're like, okay, well, if we boil this down to a problem statement, your problem statement is GDPR, and it's like. Not my job, right? So this is, we're gonna put this in another category of things not to solve. Not my problem. This is just way outside the scope of my job to worry about this thing, right? Okay, there's a second problem nested in here, which is people just don't read their emails anymore, right? We've all run into this. This is a big thing that, people talk about a lot. Email marketing is like, it's had some hard times. This is what is called a gravity problem, and you shouldn't solve gravity problems. So a gravity problem is a problem where there's no solution. It comes from this, there's an old dumb joke about this bicyclist trying really hard to get up this mountain. And you're like, how are things going? It's like, great. As soon as I solve this gravity problem, this bike ride's going to be really easy. It's like, no, it's that's not something you're going to solve. There's other stuff you could do. It's good to know about gravity, but you're not going to solve gravity. Since gravity doesn't have a solution, it's not a problem per se. It's a sort of a set of conditions to accept, right? It's good to know about those conditions, but it's not a problem for you to solve. So when Brent, I can't remember, Brent or Chet, whatever, one of these guys comes to you and says, we just need to build a feature about how people don't answer their emails anymore. And you're like, dude, that's not a problem we can solve. So let's not work on that particular problem. Okay, here's Sandra. Sandra is a customer. She's been around for a long time. She's great. She's mostly satisfied. You're doing a little user interview with her, and she comes in and says, I'd love a new report in the application. We see this data already in here, but it'd be really nice if it was just this cool report for me. Really common one with B2B SaaS. So what problem would this report solve? Well, right now I create it manually, so it'd be really nice if you could just automatically show it to me. Well, you're really the first customer to ever ask for this, and I think this data is all available in the application right now. It's just maybe not in the format you want it in. Sandra's like, yeah, totally. It takes me 10 minutes to compile it. It's once a month. This is a small quality of life improvement. This stuff comes up a lot. If you're actually talking to your customers, this stuff comes up a lot. So we have a clear problem statement. We went from hey, can you build this whole report? Down to okay, one client needs one report once a month, and it solves about 10 minutes of a problem. So it's really going to provide no value for most users and a little bit of value for one user. This is a trivial problem, perhaps too harsh of a term, but it really kind of is the definition of trivial. It causes a small amount of pain for a small amount of people. In general, these things are not worth solving for product reasons, right? So I think in general, you got to get really comfortable saying no to these types of things, or not yet. I felt that a lot of my time as a product manager was just disappointing everyone because I was saying no and not yet, which was the best thing that I could do for the future of the company and the future of the product, but it kind of just pissed everyone off. It's a hard one to do, but things that solve a small amount of pain for a small amount of people generally don't do them. This is my one giant caveat, but also sometimes do them. So here's the thing. These do solve a problem, but it's not a product problem. They solve a morale problem. And throwing people a bone actually matters a lot, and it helps to build a ton of trust. So my thing about this is at my last company, we used to do this. Every time we would get one of these, we would tag it. We use Jira, God forbid. If any of you use Jira, I'm so sorry. We use Jira, we would make a little custom tag for quick wins. Once a quarter on a Wednesday, we do Quick Wednesday, where it's the only thing you're allowed to work on is quick wins. And we turn it into like a competition, and then like, every customer success manager would get to go to their customers and be like, hey, we did like 12 of your things, people would be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so, okay, that does solve a real problem. It solves this like trust problem and like a morale problem, but like then you're doing you're working on these trivial things for a good reason, and you know why you're doing it. It doesn't solve a fundamental product problem, but like maybe you have a morale problem and you can go solve it that way. So that's my one giant caveat. Don't solve them until you do. Okay, this is the guy's very dangerous. This is your naive new product manager, and this is a real conversation that happened right when I became a product manager, and I had no idea what I was doing. Okay, so I'm your new PM. I love Agile so much. I want to put a recurring meeting on everyone's calendar once a week so we can spend an hour estimating tickets. Doesn't that sound great? Anyone want to do that? Pretty good, right? Just an hour a week, just for everyone in the whole company to complete. So Cameron's smart. Cameron's a lot smarter than me. Cameron says, what problem would that solve? I say, well, it just like really helps us like measure sprint velocity. Sure. What problem would that solve? Like, what is sprint velocity? Why do we care about it? So honestly, like what this really boils down to is like the executives don't trust any of the developers at this company, and they don't think they're being productive. And they believe that if we knew what sprint velocity was, we'd be able to make a really good roadmap. Okay, duly noted. Great. So once again, we have two problems. Here's the first problem. Executives don't trust us. This is a real one, and this is really common at almost every company that has developers, because frequently executives don't understand what developers are doing. And this is a whole area of conversation. Trust problems are pretty tough. They're very difficult. There's a lot of ways to approach them. I think one way to approach them is saying like, please let us do less process and let us just like create a really good product, and then you'll see how much we're doing. That's not always feasible, but I can tell you one thing for sure. Doing an hour-long meeting where you put point values on tickets is not going to solve your trust problem. It's just not. I've seen it tried a bunch of times. It's just not going to happen. There may be good reasons to estimate tickets. The companies that I've been at, the fundamental reason, the problem they were trying to solve was this, and it ain't gonna happen. Like that's not how trust works. Putting points on tickets is not gonna solve a trust problem. Not to mention how expensive of a solution that is, right? So if you have, I just looked up like median rates for developers in America. It's like, if you had a team of 5 spending an hour a week the whole year estimating tickets, that's a $16,000 expense to not solve a trust problem. Like, what are you doing? The second problem is like, we need a roadmap. Okay, totally. Like, yes, we should have a public roadmap. This is a real problem. We also thank you for coming to us. We, at the developers, want to be consulted in the creation of this roadmap. We want to be asked what's feasible and not feasible. This is great. Just once again, a weekly estimation meeting is not going to get us there. I've seen it tried a bunch of times. Again, sorry if people love estimating tickets. There may be totally valid reasons to do it. This ain't it. No company I've ever seen actually knows what they're doing 12 months from now. They say they do, and people get paid a lot of money to say they know what's happening 12 months from now. They don't. Like, no one does. Okay. This has all been very fun, super practical. I'll just finish with 5 tips. First tip, write a problem statement on everything you do. Everything you do should solve a problem. So every ticket you do should have a problem statement at the top. I've been working with Chris. We've been doing this. It's really cool. Every single ticket in Linear, we moved over to Linear, way better than Jira, has a problem statement at the top of it. And it's like, great. It's also like motivating and meaningful for developers, because they pick up a ticket and they're like, oh, I know what problem I'm solving. I have clarity and like meaning. There's a problem at this company and I'm going to go solve it. Like, that's really cool. At the top of documents, when you're like documenting features or like writing a scoping document, what problem does this feature solve? Why does it exist? Meeting agendas. You aren't allowed to just sort of like create a calendar invitation where you invite half the company. You need to write out at the top of it, what problem am I solving with this meeting? If the meeting doesn't solve a problem, why are you doing it, right? Everything you do, just write problem statements everywhere. Paper the ground with problem statements. Okay, you can ask other departments to do the same. right? You should lead the way by doing it yourself, but you can also ask other people to do it. You don't need a list of feature requests, which are frequently muddled and confused and over-engineered and misguided. You need a list of problems to solve. So it's reasonable to ask other people, what problem would that solve for you? People come to you and say, I need a mass email feature, I need a new report, I need whatever. What problem would that solve for you? What problem would that solve for our users? Get to clarity on that and kind of don't stop asking until you get something pretty rigorous. You can even implement this formally. Again, something that I've been working on with Chris is there's a lot of different departments at Chris's organization that have a lot of requests. People come in with requests all the time, some big, some small, and it's reasonable to ask, hey, when you say, I want you guys to go spend 6 months building this new feature, that should come with a really clear problem statement. And if it's a muddy problem statement that isn't good enough, ask them to try again. Practice saying no to non-problems. This one is tough because if you're at an organization where the executives don't trust you, maybe this is not possible. But I think it's really good to practice doing this. So as we talked about, tickets and projects should have clear problem statements. Don't work on them if they don't have them. Don't accept feature requests at face value. Push in, try to understand what problem is this solving for you. And to recap, like the kinds of things you shouldn't work on, gravity problems are problems that don't have solutions. Problems that go way outside the scope of your job. Trivial problems that solve small amount of pain for a small amount of people. And hypothetical problems, which are really just about like future users that we don't yet have. This one's really tough. When the problem is solved, stop. Go find another problem, right? So this is what's really powerful about like writing a problem statement at the top of a ticket is like the acceptance criteria for is this ticket done is like, is the problem solved? If yes, move on. Like go solve another problem. This should be motivating and exciting. Don't just write code for the sake of writing code. That's a big waste of time. Don't over-engineer things. Don't build things to be more complex or bigger than they need to be. Solve the problem. Go find the next most important problem. Solve it. Go find the next. This is your job. You're a professional problem solver. And finally, this is what you can use to yell at your product managers and executives. Processes. I'm a big believer in product minimalism. I think that basically the best way to build a good product process is to start with nothing and like solve problems from first principles. This is a thing I really like doing with our clients and things that we do even internally at Thump is like we start with nothing and we just start building and then we do weekly retros to just say what's not working. And then we go into the weekly retro and everyone says, oh, I actually have no idea what other people are working on. We're like, okay, well, that's why you have a stand-up. Let's implement a stand-up, And then we come back and we're like, what's going on? And people are like, no, I got stuck on this ticket for like 3 days and I didn't really understand what the problem was. We're like, okay, great. We're going to write tickets like this now. And there's like a little bit more of a structure here. But the structure was like, had the buy-in from everyone involved. And we like built it up piecemeal in ways that solved problems. And we never took on meetings that don't solve problems. So in the same way, you can kind of cherry pick. There are some smart ideas in Agile. There's some smart ideas in Scrum and whatever else, all these different kind of buzzwords that people use. There are smart ideas in there. That doesn't mean you just need to go take the thing whole cloth and implement it and say, hey, everybody, I've booked 6 new meetings on your calendar. That's a crazy idea that's going to make people hate you. And so you can cherry pick good ideas and cherry pick them as they actually solve problems for you. And of course, go back and reconsider the existing meetings on your calendar, the existing processes, ask whether they solve a problem. If you have the power to cancel them or say no to them, cancel them or say no to them if they don't solve a problem. That's it.